Hello, and welcome to Mental Maps and the Mind's Eye, gaming with aphantasia. So, we'll start off this talk with, who am I? Well, my name is Laura Kate Dale. I'm a full-time video game critic and a published author. I've written a few books, some about disability stuff, some about video games. I've got a book called Uncomfortable Labels that's about being an autistic trans woman, and on the other end, I've got a book called Things I Learned from Mario's Butt that is all about video game character buttocks. I'm an autistic trans woman, and among a couple of other conditions, I have aphantasia. I host a weekly video game series on YouTube called Access Ability that's all about accessibility and representation in the games industry. And I've done some consulting work with game developers in the past with regards to LGBT and disability representation. Aphantasia is the lack of a visual imagination, or what a lot of people call the mind's eye. I lack the ability to visually picture things in my head. I just don't have a visual imagination. Aphantasia is a condition that people can be born with or develop later in life. Growing up, I always assumed that the idea of having a visual imagination was something that people exaggerated or didn't mean to be taken literally. If I were to say to many of you now, imagine a red truck, imagine your house, imagine a beach, I always sort of assumed that people were asking me to conceptualize what I knew about those concepts, or to describe a hypothetical platonic ideal of those concepts. Like, I would always sort of just think words about the attributes that those images must have. I would remember facts about the hypothetical that I know must be true. I didn't think I was actually meant to be seeing something pretend in my head as an image that didn't exist. About 1% of the global population have aphantasia. Some people have absolutely no visual imagination, whereas some people have a limited visual imagination. There's a spectrum of ways that this can be experienced, but for me, I have no visual imagination when I am awake. Having aphantasia doesn't mean that I can't dream. When I'm asleep, when I'm unconscious, my brain apparently knows how to make visual images and present them in my head, but when I am awake, that ability just doesn't exist. My brain doesn't know how to voluntarily bring up a mental image. When it comes to gaming with aphantasia, the things that people are going to find difficult will vary depending on what kind of coping mechanisms over the years they found to adapt to the condition. So, for this talk, I'm largely going to focus on my own experiences lacking a visual imagination, and the things that I personally find difficult and the things that help me. In video games with big sprawling maps containing lots of winding paths and roads, I often really struggle to mentally picture a route from where I am to where I'm going. Taking my current location and extrapolating it and holding in my head a route to where I'm going is really difficult to do when you don't have a visual imagination to picture those visual steps. If I've made a journey a lot of times before, I can often retread that journey reflexively using muscle memory. Once I've played a certain video game for a while, I can usually retread a route I have made before, but I will always take the same route because picturing how a different route might connect up to my existing route is very difficult, if not impossible. The issue is mainly that I can't picture new routes up front ahead of time. If the video game that I'm playing offers a pause menu map, then I can reference that map and see a route to my destination, but often, within a few seconds of having to close that map and go back to the game, I'm back to being lost. Once I'm not actively looking at the map, I struggle to create a mental picture of what I was just looking at, or how far along that route I am. You can provide me a map and that will be helpful, but if I have to put it away to make the journey, I'm just going to have to open it multiple times along my route. It's going to take me forever to navigate your world. Usually in games with these kind of static pause screen only maps, I kind of have to deal with this by looking at the map and telling myself the next few verbal instructions and trying to recall those. I can't visualize the route, but for me, I can remember instructions like left, left, skip a turn, right, more effectively than I could try and remember what the map looked like. Video games with mini-maps, objective markers, and placeable map pins really help in this regard, as I can reference them every few seconds if needed to see where I need to head next, rather than needing to recall visual information that I'm not currently looking at. A great example of a recent open-world video game I found easy to navigate was 2020's Yakuza Like a Dragon, which allowed me to pop down a marker on the map of where I would like to go. The game then overlaid a route onto the map. It sort of drew the line connecting where I was and where I needed to go, and then presented that line on a mini-map that was available on screen while I played. I could make the journey while referencing this mini-map and seeing exactly which turns I needed to take in the short term, without needing to try and guess at the route and remember the whole picture at once. I could just get the game to draw a line of where I needed to go, and allow me to check it as I was moving as I reached each turning. One of my favourite games from 2020 that I struggled to play due to aphantasia and needed to find some outside assistance with is a game called Among Us, where it's a hidden role game. Some players are murderers, other players are trying to complete tasks, and every now and then you have a big interrogation and everyone tries to work out who's lying about what they've been doing and who's been doing murders. A key part of the interrogation step in Among Us is being able to describe your precise actions during gameplay to assert your innocence to other players. I typically need to play Among Us with a map available to me on a separate screen, because for some reason, when you're in the interrogation step and trying to explain to people what you were doing and where you were going, the game does not allow you to pull up an in-game map and to look at what the locations are called and how they fit next to each other. For me, having a visual reference point makes it so much easier to describe my route and what I was doing. I struggle to hold that information in my head, but as soon as you put a map in front of me, I can piece it together. I can go, oh yes, I went to that location, then that, and I can build a route to describe to someone. Another game from 2020 that I really loved, but I really struggled to play because my aphantasia made it near impossible to play without crowdsourced help, was a game called Carrion. It's a game in which you play a giant meat tentacle monster trying to violently escape from a scientific facility. I loved the plot, and I loved the moment-to-moment gameplay. However, the game contained no kind of map whatsoever, and only very vague objective markers, which could tell you the direction of an objective as the crow flies, but not how to get there through the game's winding and complex map. What made Carrion really difficult for me to play with aphantasia was that I wasn't ever going through an area enough times to build up any kind of reflex on my journey, and the map was incredibly non-linear. There were also frequent teleportation spots that would jump the player around the facility. Even when I realised that an old area and a new area connected to each other, I couldn't build any kind of mental picture of how the two areas connected. I just had no ability to put that information together in my head. Without seeing any kind of overview of the picture as a whole of what the location was, I couldn't imagine how areas connected together, and I frequently found myself just completely at a loss as to how to get through this game's environment. I ended up having to find a crowdsourced map made online by fans, and while I managed to get through the game and I enjoyed it, having just a mini-map or a map that uncovered as I went through the game would have been incredibly helpful. I understand that the developers probably had some kind of logic that was something like, this is a big meat tentacle monster that's just escaped a lab. It probably isn't going to stop and carefully assess a map. That's probably not the kind of creature it is. But that doesn't change the fact that this game that I really enjoyed, that was very much my jam, was near unplayable for me without crowdsourced help, and even then it was a bit of a stretch. So, I've largely used this talk so far to talk about creating and navigating maps in games with aphantasia, but there are several other areas of games that I find difficult with aphantasia that I think could definitely be helped by small tweaks from developers as well. While I absolutely love detective mystery visual novel style games, such as Ace Attorney and Danganronpa. One aspect of them that I often struggle with in the moment is remembering and visualising any clues that were delivered primarily visually. If I'm expected to remember what a crime scene looked like, I struggle to imagine the image of the scene, which can cause issues. I appreciate when games in these kinds of genres give me, as the player, the ability to, midway through the case, check all of my evidence at my leisure. Ideally, if they provide me photos of the crime scene I can look back at again, that tends to be really helpful. Additionally, while I know some players of these games find flashbacks or lengthy verbal descriptions of things that the player can simply see in the scene kind of irritating, I find them really useful. Any chance to either look at the visual information again or to memorize someone's words about an event make it much easier for me to find the answers the game is looking for. Also, games, please give me a glossary of people's names and faces that I can check at any time. If you mention a name, let me bring up a picture of their face so I can see who you're talking about. So many times in games, I find myself having to Google characters during conversations only to instantly recognize them. I couldn't picture their face while you were discussing them, but if you let me see their face, I'll click who you're on about. Additionally, if your game contains puzzles where the solution is an image located elsewhere in the game, make sure you support the player taking screenshots in your software. I know it's not a super common problem, but some Switch games don't allow for screenshot captures, and when those games also have puzzles where you need to remember and later imagine something that you saw, I'm just gonna get stuck and have to go and find paper to draw things out myself. Lastly, I find it really useful when games allow me as a player to back out of actions if I realise I've not correctly visualised my position within a scene. Ikenfell is an indie RPG about solving a mystery at a magic school where every character and each of their attacks have a set range of effectiveness around them. The game allows me to place my character, select an attack, and then see the area the attack will hit. If I've positioned myself incorrectly on the map because I haven't visualised properly where the attack's going to hit, I can back out of the attack, reposition my character with no penalty, and try again. I don't need to imagine the move's effective range, it's laid out for me, and I'm not penalised for going, "Oh, I put myself in the wrong spot, let's fix that." So, what can game developers do to help? Honestly, the solutions that would help me to game with Aphantasia are pretty simple. Provide maps which the player doesn't need to pause to reference, so that the player isn't having to look at the map, remember it, visually imagine it, and then act upon it. Let players revisit visual information that they need to remember details from. Let me pull up information that is important that you showed me and look at it again if I can't remember or picture what it looks like. Let players back out of their actions if they've positioned themselves incorrectly in gameplay and need to retry what they're doing. Don't lock people into position when they're trying to work out whether something's going to hit correctly or not. Have a glossary of names and faces that's available at all times that players can just pull up and have a look at. Make sure players have the option to take screenshots easily so that if there's something that you're showing them and they need to remember what it looks like, they can pull that up. They don't have to remember it or go find pen and paper to write it down. They can just pull that information back up. Lastly, game developers realize that a lot of these things that would help me as a gamer with Aphantasia would be seen by most of your audience as just good quality of life changes. Most of these things don't necessarily, have to come across as accessibility features and, are not here just for disabled players like myself. Helpful mini-maps, the ability to check things you've forgotten, the ability to check screenshots and re-reference are going to be helpful for a lot of players, not just the ones like me who have no visual imagination. These are generally useful features that you should really be thinking about in games. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for watching this talk. I can be found at LauraKBuzz on Twitter, YouTube, and other social media. My email, if you want to get in touch, is laurakbuzzofficial@gmail.com. I produce videos about accessibility in gaming in a series called Accessibility, which is uploaded to youtube.com/LauraKBuzz every Friday. And I've written some books about my own lived experiences, including living at the intersection of being trans and autistic, which is called Uncomfortable Labels, and it's out now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a good rest of this conference.